Joining me now is Senior Fellow at the Menzies Research Centre, Nick Cater. Nick, lefty social media influencers on the campaign trail, yes or no?
I'm not really sure, Rita. I think if they want influencers and they really want to be talking to people like you, professional journalists who still actually, the majority of people get their news, particularly on something like the budget, from the mainstream media, and that's who they should be talking to. But presumably I think they'll get a bit of a softer ride from these people. I had a look at some of these influencers, what they posted from Canberra. One was they spent half the Instagram telling us what they bought in the supermarket by way of food to keep them going. Another one was complaining that there was 4 hours in the lockup without internet and it was hell. I would have thought it would be quite pleasant, actually. But anyway, that's it. It's all pretty shallow, pretty ordinary. I don't think these people really have that much influence. And if they do, the people they're influencing must be even more insignificant than they are. So I think it's a bit of a gimmick, to be honest.
It'll be interesting to see if it does have an impact, because that younger demographic can be harder to reach. So if they're getting the message through, it's not as silly as it seems. Now to yesterday's Senate debate on new laws to protect Tasmania's salmon farming industry, and we had this performance from Greens Senator Sarah Hanson-Young.
On the eve of the election, have you sold out your environment credentials for a rotten, stinking extinction salmon? Extinction salmon.
Senator Hanson-Young, remove the prop from the chamber.
Really is a bit of a circus. Unfortunately for Sarah, the stunt didn't really convince anyone. The law passed the Senate. Nick, the Greens, are they going to come up with more imaginative ways to grab headlines?
I think they kind of lost their way, haven't they? It's nice to see, in a way, the Greens going back and talking about the environment, I suppose, more broadly, and not about Palestine or gender equity and all these other things they talk about, transgender rights. But look, I think it shows the desperation the Greens, the desperate spot they're in at the moment. Their vote has softened, it's flattened, they're having trouble getting traction. Part of that, I think, is because the Labor Party under Albanese has gone so far to the left and stolen much of their ground. But they really are struggling, really, to find their way right now. I mean, what do they represent? The party of dead fish, apparently. But, and I think the attack on the Tasmanian salmon industry, obviously, is very damaging to the people in Tasmania. And I see that the Prime Minister has actually had the good sense not to come down against salmon farming.
Now, the coalition has pledged to halve the fuel excise for 12 months if they win the upcoming election, meaning a driver who fills up a 55-litre tank once a week would save around $14 a week. If you drive a large SUV or a ute, the savings will be about $20 a week. Nick, it's a policy the Greenies will certainly hate, but it leaves most Australians better off than Labor's 70 cents a day tax cut. Is this a winner?
I think it's very well targeted, Rita. I think the sort of people that will benefit from this are the people in the outer suburbs and regions where the coalition has a very good chance of picking up some Labor seats from some very angry Labor voters in places like Sydney and Melbourne. These are the people with sometimes 2, 3, 4 cars per household, and not because they want to show off, but because they've simply got to have them to get anywhere. They're tradies, they're people having to take the kids to school, their mum's trying to get to work. So I think this will go down very well indeed, and it's much better than giving an almost nothing tax cut to almost everybody. It's much better to target this at hard-working Australians who really need some relief at the petrol pumps.
Let's turn our attention now to this rally that took place. Looks like it's at the University of Technology in Sydney. And according to this man, Jews in Australia should not feel comfortable.
I agree with Rhonda when she says Jews in particular should feel uncomfortable, and it's our duty to make them uncomfortable. And that includes the fellow over there.
And who is this Randa he agrees with? It appears to be Dr. Randa Abdel Fattah, a Macquarie University academic, infamous for her appearances at pro-Palestinian rallies. UTS was contacted for comment, and they said the university has zero tolerance for any form of racism or discrimination. An investigation into comments made at the rally is underway. Nick, what happened to these new laws we were going to have, which were meant to prevent this sort of thing, and this entire idea of making Jewish students feel uncomfortable? It is just so abhorrent, and the fact that it's been spoken about loudly and proudly, it just shows you just how far we have fallen and how deep this anti-Semitism is in the community.
Exactly. They just don't seem to realise these are the very people, of course, that would be up in arms about any hint of discrimination against any other group in the country, whether it's Muslims or people from, Indigenous people, First Nations people, of course, we should call them, Rita, we should remember that. Any sort of discrimination, they would be up in arms again. But this is okay, apparently. And yet this is extraordinarily damaging to multicultural Australia. We got to a position, I thought, in Australia where we just, race didn't matter. Those things didn't matter. These people are making it matter again in a very, very ugly way. And most Australians, I think, would be deeply uncomfortable about the fact that this sort of thing is not only going on, but apparently is condoned.
Now let's talk about DEI, ESG in the corporate sector. The Australian Report's founder of software titan Technology One, Adrian DeMarco, says the best people are staying away from public boards because listed Australian companies have become too woke, and that Donald Trump's war on DEI programs is a wake-up call. He also said, it's the reason I won't sit on public boards because it's just too inefficient. Nick, DeMarco argues that superannuation funds with all their DEI mandates just have too much influence on how publicly traded businesses run their affairs. Do you agree with that?
I do. I want a superannuation fund to invest my money where it's going to make the most money, not according to some artificial criteria about DEI or ESG or any of these other things. They're not, of course. But it's interesting, isn't it? These companies, they're investing so much of our money that we have to give them. By the way, we don't have any choice about investing in super in this country. And that they just live off the profits of it and just operate their business in an entirely ludicrous way. But there's certainly a backlash coming against this, not just in the US. You can see it here too, and I'm convinced that the tide is changing, Rita. It might take quite a while to change in places like the university and our ABC, but I think in the corporate world they're beginning to see the light.
Well, let's hope so, because it is just rife throughout the corporate world. The left's march through the institutions may have started in academia, but my gosh, they have progressed and they are really dominating in the corporate world as well when it comes to corporate culture, and it's creating so many problems. Now, we've got a long way to go, though, to get to the UK, where they've just seemed completely lost the plot. You've got a pedophile migrant here, Nick, who assaulted a teenage girl in Britain, but has been allowed to remain in the country because the judge has ruled that deporting this sex offender would be unduly harsh. And one of the reasons argued was that it would be inhumane or degrading treatment if he was sent back to Pakistan because of his alcoholism. So the alcoholism has helped him remain in the UK, despite his horrendous track record.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? It's just like they're looking for an excuse for it. I mean, this just doesn't stand up to the light of day, this kind of argument. Any excuse to allow this paedophile to stay in Britain. This is causing a great deal of anger in Britain, as you know, as it is in the United States, as it is here. Ordinary people are just sick of this stuff. It seems like the people who actually live in the country, the actual citizens of the country, their rights are just not nobody takes any notice of those anymore. And certainly, you know, the rights of children not to be interfered with by Pakistanis who are there illegally, that doesn't come into it, does it, anymore? It's the rights of this poor man. You know, it would be inhumane to send him back to Pakistan, the place where presumably he was born and bred and brought up, just because he has an alcohol problem. You know, this just takes the biscuit, doesn't it? I mean, I know alcohol is not frowned upon in Pakistan, but, you know, it's a ridiculous excuse.
And another example of the UK completely losing the plot, Damon Joshua, who posted a comment about Hamas being disgusting terrorists. He posted this on a staff discussion board. That's what he said. He called Hamas disgusting terrorists. Well, apparently that caused significant offence, Nick, and he was sacked. He was sacked by Severn Trent Water, a UK water supply operator. What have we come to where if you call murderous, barbaric terrorists what they are, if you call them disgusting, you could lose your job?
It's extraordinary, isn't it, Rita? It is absolutely extraordinary that a water company should think this was anything of their business, let alone a matter to dismiss a member of staff. I mean, what he said is entirely defensible. In fact, it's the truth. These are terrorists, and they are disgusting. So where does that cause harm to anybody? I mean, if anybody wants to dispute that, go ahead. But they are terrorists, and they are very, very disgusting people. I think disgusting is too mild a word, to be quite honest. So why this should cause any controversy said anywhere in the world, I don't know.
Nick Cater, thank you so much for your time tonight.